And let me tell you, there is nothing in the world like asking for and expecting a Coke and somebody hands you a Pepsi instead. That's why trademarks are so important. Trademarks make sure that consumers get what they paid for.
There's someone you should know.
Hey everybody, welcome to the BOMB Podcast. BOMB stands for Business of Music Bootcamp, which means that this is the place where we will drill down on the business and legal aspects of the music industry. Everything from copyrights and contracts to policies and practices. Whatever it takes to educate and empower you with the knowledge you need to make informed decisions about how to protect yourself and your music is what you'll find on the BOMB. I'm your host, Professor Butler, and as a retired entertainment attorney, former record label executive, music law professor, and college administrator, I have counseled thousands of artists and musicians on the intricacies of the music business. Now it's your turn.
The information in this podcast is not intended, nor should it be construed as legal advice. If you have questions of a legal nature, we strongly recommend that you contact an attorney in your local jurisdiction who specializes in music and/or entertainment law. For guidance, check out our website at professorbutler.com and sign up to receive a free resource on how to find the right lawyer for you. And now, your host of the BOMB Podcast, Professor Butler.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the BOMB Podcast, episode number 4. I'm your host, Professor Butler, and in today's episode, we're going to pick up where we left off in episode number 3 last week, which was part of a 2-part episode entitled, What If They Steal My Name? And if you haven't had a chance to listen to episode number 3, I strongly suggest you do so. But don't worry, because you'll still be able to follow along today, because I'm going to provide you with a brief recap of last week's commentary, as well as discuss the latest news regarding the issue of trademarks. All right. Last week, we opened up with the battle between country trio Lady Antebellum and blues singer Lady A. And as you might recall, the word antebellum refers to the period prior to the Civil War, which includes slavery. And when the group formed 14 years ago, they claimed to have named their band after the Southern antebellum style home where they first took their band photos, because the home reminded them of all the music born in the South that influenced them, including Southern rock, blues, R&B, gospel, and of course, country music. But they also say that they were regretful and embarrassed that they did not take into consideration the words insensitive associations. Therefore, out of respect for the Black Lives Matter movement, the band decided to change their name to Lady A, presumably not knowing that there was already a blues R&B singer by the name of Lady A, aka Anita White, in existence. And also not realizing that A still stands for antebellum. But that little tidbit is neither here nor there. Anywho, let's stop there and talk about the law behind this issue, which is trademark law. Trademark is one of those confusing areas of the law, much like copyrights. And as a matter of fact, many people often confuse the two because they both protect what's known as intellectual property. Intellectual property consists of primarily copyrights, trademarks, and patents. And I'll probably review the various kinds of intellectual property and the differences between them in a later episode, but for now, let's just focus on trademarks. The United States Patent and Trademark Office, the federal agency charged with maintaining the National Register of Trademarks, also known as the USPTO, has a great publication that describes the basics of trademark law and protection, as well as registration. So I'll be breaking down some of their information and applying it to our Lady A case so that it's a little simpler and easier to understand. Exactly what is a trademark? The USPTO defines a trademark as a word, phrase, symbol, or design, or combination thereof that identifies and distinguishes the source of the goods of one party from those of other parties. In other words, a trademark, which is the term used for goods or merchandise, and a service mark, which is the term used for services, is something that identifies the goods and services that you offer as belonging to you and distinguishes or differentiates your goods and services from other people's goods and services. The key words here are identifies and distinguishes. So let's take those words one at a time, right? The name of this podcast is called The BOMB Podcast. The word or acronym BOMB, B-O-M-B, identifies a podcast that was created and is owned by me, Professor Butler. Therefore, the word BOMB is my mark, also known as my trademark or even my service mark. So anytime you see or hear the word BOMB or the acronym BOMB, you'll know that it refers to me and my podcast, as opposed to somebody else's podcast. And there can only be one BOMB podcast, or else people might get confused. And confusion is something that we'll talk about a little later. Now, the cool thing about trademark law is that there are any number of things that can be used as your mark, so long as they identify your products and or services. For example, an identifying mark can be letters, like NBC or IBM. It can be a word, like Apple or Google. It could be a logo or a design, like the Golden Arches. It might be a picture or a drawing, like a puma or a robot. It can be a slogan, like "Just Do It" or "I'm loving it." It can even include colors, shapes, and sounds. And of course, your mark can also include a combination of all of the above. An easy example of a company with multiple marks would be the fast food chain McDonald's. The company has several marks which identify the goods and services that they provide, which is basically food and beverages. They have the name McDonald's, which uses a particular font and color whenever you see it. They have the giant letter M, also known as the Golden Arches, which are always yellow. That's why they call them golden. They have the slogan, "I'm loving it." And they also have marks that identify some of their individual products, such as the Happy Meal, the Big Mac, and their McCafe line of coffee products. All of these marks, all of these names and letters and slogans identify the goods and services of the McDonald's Corporation. But the mark must not only identify, it must also distinguish your goods and services from a company with similar goods and services. So basically, your mark has to be unique enough for people to tell the difference between you and somebody else in the same business or the same line of work. Let's use our example from last week's episode, the Chroma EU case. And as a recap, the famous Kardashian sisters developed a line of cosmetics called Chroma. Problem was, there was already a line of cosmetics called Chroma that had existed for 12 years prior. Now, the court that issued the injunction that ordered that the Kardashians remove their products from more than 5,000 stores spread out over 48 states, stated that the likelihood of confusing the products was high, and that the lesser-known Chroma could suffer irreparable harm if the Kardashians' Chroma was allowed to keep the name. Two companies with the same name, in the same business, or in the same line of work would make it confusing for consumers to tell them apart. And that is the essence of trademark protection. If two marks sell similar or related goods and services, one of those marks could cause something the law refers to as the likelihood of confusion, which is the exact problem that trademark law was designed to prevent. Trademark law protects consumers and makes sure that they are getting the products and service they intended to get. That's why your mark must be unique and distinctive enough to differentiate your goods and services from other people's goods and services in a similar business or related category. The confusing mark does not have to be identical to your mark in order to infringe upon your mark, nor do you have to prove that people will actually be confused or are actually confused by the mark. You need only prove that the marks identify related products and that there is a likelihood of confusing one mark with the other. So, what about our Lady A case? Well, the name Lady Antebellum identifies a singing group that sings and records songs. The name Lady A identifies a singer who sings and records songs. The names are unique and distinctive in that they do not look or sound the same in a way that could cause consumer confusion, so each name is eligible for a trademark. No problem, right? Right. But when Lady Antebellum decided to become Lady A, they are both singers in the same line of work or the same business, that is, the business of singing and recording songs. They both release music. They're both on Spotify. They're both on other platforms. People could be confused when they attempt to search for, listen to, or purchase products from one Lady A and find out that it's not the Lady A they thought it was. And let me tell you, there is nothing in the world like asking for and expecting a Coke and someone hands you a Pepsi instead. That's why trademarks are so important. They make sure that consumers get what they paid for. Now, I know what you're thinking. Well, one is a band that sings country music, and the other one is a woman who sings blues and R&B. So how can anyone be confused? Remember, the issue isn't whether or not there is definitely confusion. The law only looks for the likelihood of confusion, which is fairly simple to prove if the marks sound the same, and in this case, the marks are identical. So if this case is so open and shut, why is Lady Antebellum suing Anita Lady A. White? Well, that's a good question. I mentioned last week that the singer blasted the band on social media for not reaching out to her. But when they finally did contact her, it sounded as if they were going to come to some sort of agreement for them both to use the name Lady A. So let me get this right. I own the name. And instead of you respecting my rights in the name, you want us both to use the name. Well, what about consumer confusion? That is the effed up, excuse my French, part of this whole deal. The band does not care about consumer confusion. The band, Lady Antebellum, does not care about people being confused because they have the bigger, more popular mark. They have the bigger, more popular brand. I read in Rolling Stone that prior to this whole fiasco, when you searched Lady A on the internet, you found Anita White. Now when you search Lady A, all you see is Lady Antebellum. If they were to both use that name, poor Miss Anita would get lost in the shadows, and they know it, and that's why they don't care. Another reason I can't figure out why they're suing her is because the band filed a suit in district court for something called a declaratory judgment. And in a nutshell, that means that the band wants a judge to decide or declare that they can use the name Lady A. According to the band members, they're not suing her for money, right? They just want the right to use her name, which is weird because usually you generally only ask for a declaratory judgment after somebody has threatened to sue you. Now, what I read is that Miss Anita did ask the band for $10 million. And you might think $10 million, that's a lot of money. Well, that's the exact amount of money that the owner of Chroma sued the Kardashians for back in 2014, right? So if $10 million was sufficient in 2014, it should be sufficient in 2020. And she had the right to ask for that money because it's her name. But as far as I know, she did not threaten to sue them. So their lawsuit might be premature. Who knows? I don't know. It's a soap opera. So just stay tuned for the conclusion of Lady A's as Lady A's The World Turns. And we'll get back to that in the coming weeks. So enough of Lady A. What about Lady U? How do you avoid having what happened to the original Lady A, Anita White, happen to you? Well, there are 3 steps that you can take to properly protect your name against would-be infringers. The biggest step is step number 1. You have to conduct a search. And the first type of search you do is a USPTO search. You have no idea how many artists and bands I have come across that seem to just pull a name out of a hat, without even considering whether or not someone else already has the same name. And if you think your name is unique, somebody else might have thought of it first. And don't forget that your stage name or your PKA, your professionally known as name, is what identifies you in the marketplace and distinguishes you from other artists. You don't want to be confused with another artist, right? You want to be able to create and establish your own brand. So, in order to make sure that your name is sufficiently unique and distinctive, the first thing you need to do and absolutely must do is conduct a name search. The USPTO.gov website suggests that you clear any name you intend to use. Clear is basically just search and to make sure that no one else is using it. A clearance search on the USPTO website allows you to find trademarks that could present problems for you in the future due to a likelihood of confusion. Just follow the instructions on the website regarding the various types of searches, type in the name you're interested in using, and see what comes up. Unfortunately, there is a big problem associated with clearing your name, and that is that many musicians, basically people in the same business as you are in, don't register their name with the USPTO. If you search the USPTO website and the other person has not registered their name, you won't find it. Therefore, you won't know not to use it. And why didn't they register their name? Don't you have to? Actually, you don't. Registration is not required. And registration is not how you get a trademark in the first place. Now, this is key. Whenever I talk about copyright law, for example, I explain that there are any number of benefits to registering your work with the Copyright Office, but that registration is not required for copyright protection because copyright protection is automatic upon fixation. And I talked a lot about that in episode number 2. Well, it's similar with trademark law. You really should register your name with the USPTO if you want the broadest protections available. But you don't get a trademark by registering the mark. You get a trademark by using the mark. That's right. As soon as you come up with a unique and distinctive moniker that identifies and distinguishes your goods or services in the marketplace, and you are the first person to start doing business with that name or identifier, then you have acquired a trademark in that name. It's just that simple. The first one to use the name owns the name. And this is the essence of common law trademark protection. Common law rights are governed by state rather than by federal law or statute, which means that common law trademark rights are limited to the geographic area in which the mark is used. Let me give you an example. If a dry cleaning company that operated under the name the Washatorium is in the state of Utah, under common law, the trademark rights to that name exist only in the state of Utah. Now, you can register your mark with the Utah Secretary of State for trademark protection in Utah only. But if another dry cleaner begins to use the name Washatorium, let's say in Texas, there would be no trademark infringement in Texas because your rights in Utah are common law rights only. You never registered the mark. They only exist in Utah, which means that both Washatorium in Texas and the Washatorium in Utah can use the mark in their respective states, something known as concurrent trademark use, which is what I think Lady Antebellum is trying to get with Lady A. They both want to be able to use the mark. The only way that the Texas washatorium could infringe upon the common law rights of the Utah washatorium would be to franchise or do business in the state of Utah, where a washatorium dry cleaner already exists. But I have a question. What if the washatorium in Utah is doing business in more than one state? For example, on the internet. What if they're engaged in interstate commerce? What are its common law rights then? Well, I am so glad you asked, because this is a changing and developing area of the law. Some courts have found that the internet can be its own territory or market. However, while anybody can access your website from the internet from anywhere in the country or the world for that matter, that does not mean that the existence of a website alone is enough of a use to convey national, geographic, common law, trademark protection. However, an e-commerce site that is backed by active sales throughout the country might establish nationwide common law trademark protection. But the only way to know that for sure is to just ask a lawyer. Because like I said, this is a very complicated, developing area of the law. So make sure you contact a trademark attorney in your jurisdiction for questions on whether your common law trademark use on the internet qualifies for nationwide protection. Phew! All right. What do you do when someone is relying upon that unregistered common law trademark? How do you find them? Because the mark isn't registered anywhere, right? You follow step number 2. You conduct either a paid professional or a free internet search. If you search the USPTO database and you don't find the mark you're looking for, you are still not off the hook. Because under U.S. law, you are still required to attempt to discover if any common law rights exist. You can either pay someone like a lawyer to do a thorough search for you. You can use one of the paid or fee-based trademark search engines or firm that you can find on the internet. They'll do a search for you. Or you can do what most people do, which is just to Google it. A simple Google search will let you know if someone else is using the name that you'd like to use. So it's really important. Do not start using a name until you've done a thorough search. This is important because whether someone registers their name or not, you'll still be held responsible for finding out if someone has a superior claim, which basically means that they used the name first. And even if a trademark is unregistered, its existence could prevent you from registering your mark in your own name or from using the trademark legally in certain states. Let's say you did a USPTO search and nothing identical to your mark or similar to your mark enough to cause confusion came up. Next, you conduct a Google search and you can't seem to find anyone in the same or related line of work that's using the name that you want to use. This means that at this point in time, you are in the clear and you can start using the name in commerce. That use of the name will establish your common law rights in the name, as well as what the USPTO refers to as a priority, which means that your rights are senior to everyone else, basically because you had the mark and you used the mark first. All right, step number 3, what do you do next? Right? You searched, no one had the name. Now you start using the name in business. Next thing you do, you really should register that trademark. And I know what you're thinking. I just said that registration is not required, and that's because it's not. But if you want the maximum amount of protection, especially on a national scale, you really need to register your mark or marks, because you might have more than one. You might have a logo and a name and a slogan like McDonald's or Nike. You want to register your mark or marks with the USPTO. Unfortunately, we do not have enough time in this week's episode to review trademark registration. So what I'll do is I'll just have to discuss that process in more detail at another time. By then, we may even have another update on the Lady Antebellum versus Lady A dispute. And one more thing. What if you do search the USPTO site and the internet, and you do find a name that's the same or similar to the name that you want to use? What do you do then? Well, it depends. If the name you want to use is identical to someone else, like Lady A, for example, then your best bet is to not use that name. The owner of that name can come after you with a cease and desist letter, which basically means stop using my name and infringing upon my rights. If you fail to comply, they can sue you or threaten to sue you. Or in the case of Anita White, they can ask you for $10 million. However, if the name you want to use is not identical to the name you found or the name you searched, but it's similar, you'll need to ask yourself and perhaps even a lawyer whether or not there will be a likelihood of confusion, deception, or mistake as to the source of the goods and services. Because remember, we're trying to protect consumers and make sure that when they see or hear a particular mark, that they know what they are paying for. All right, so what have we learned in this week's episode? My goodness. Well, first we learned what a trademark is and what it protects. A trademark is a name, phrase, slogan, or other moniker that identifies specific goods and services and distinguishes those goods from other similar goods and services in the marketplace. We also learned that one of the purposes of trademarks is to protect consumers and prevent the likelihood of confusing similar marks. We learned that the way to get a trademark is to simply come up with a unique and distinctive name and be the first to use it in the marketplace, in commerce, in business. We learned that you absolutely must clear or search the name before you start using it to make sure that no one else is using it. You can do that through the USPTO or through the internet. And finally, we learned that although not required, you really should register your trademark with the USPTO in order to receive the maximum protection under the law. And as I mentioned, we will talk about registration in an entirely different episode because that can be sort of a long, lingering subject as well. But I did want you to have an understanding of what Lady A's rights are in her dispute with Lady Antebellum and what your rights would be if you make sure that you search the name before you start using it. All right. Well, that's all for episode 4 of the Bomb Podcast. I hope you're having a good time as good a time as I'm having. Take care and we'll see you next week. Thanks for joining me on the Bomb Podcast. If you were educated, empowered, or inspired by what you heard, please subscribe today to be the first to receive the latest episode. And don't forget, post a review, tell a friend, follow me on social media, and join my tribe at ProfessorButler.com.